Alright, as I was growing up, I would often hear people ask me what I wanted to do with my life, and usually this question would start out with, if money were no object. And that's usually where they kind of lost me, because the two of the most precious things, really besides family and life, are money and time, and that's hard to get. So, when I was figuring out what I wanted to do, I decided storytelling, because that's something I feel like anybody can do. Now, putting that into movies and novels is a bit harder, but telling a story in general is something we can all do. And so that's why I'm going to be talking about how to tell a bad story. Lately I've been noticing a lot of movies and novels really aren't as good as they could be because they're not putting too much thought into it. They think if they put a few explosions over here, a romantic scene right over there, then we'll have something good. And that can be entertaining, but it's not going to be memorable. So I'm going to start off with telling you a little story about marshmallows. The clock struck 8, and I knew it was time for my favorite treat, a mug of hot cocoa. It was somewhat of a nightly ritual I had started since I was about 3 years old. I always had hot cocoa at exactly 8 o'clock. I'd have a marshmallow or two with it. That night, however, everything changed. I made my hot cocoa and I searched the cupboards for my bag of marshmallows, only to find it was empty. My heart began to race and I broke into a sweat. No marshmallows? No, it wasn't possible. It couldn't be. I always had marshmallows with my hot cocoa. I started to rummage around the cupboards, tossing aside boxes and cans. Maybe they were somewhere I'd forgotten. Yet the more I searched, the more I felt myself panicking. I started tossing more cans and boxes to the floor as I emptied the cupboards. No marshmallows in sight. I started to search the shelves, throwing away forks and knives as I kept searching. Nothing. Soon the floor was littered with cans and boxes and cutlery, yet there was still no sign of any marshmallows. I clenched my hands into fists and began to sob. This was terrible. Then I got an idea. The fridge. Maybe there were marshmallows in there. Yes, I had to try. I simply couldn't live with myself otherwise. I opened the fridge with great speed and started to toss aside all the useless food that was stacked inside. No sign of any marshmallows, though. This was starting to cause me to get dizzy with stress. I threw the contents of the fridge across the floor until I found myself staring into emptiness. I collapsed. No marshmallows. I couldn't believe it. I looked over the counter and saw my hot cocoa. It was starting to get cold, yet I couldn't drink it without marshmallows. I was starting to shake all over. Then it came to me in an instant. I knew of a place I had marshmallows. I looked down and started to pat my stomach. Yes, there must be marshmallows in there, like a cookie jar. I mean, I had just drank hot cocoa the previous night, and the marshmallows must still be in there somewhere. Despite my tears, I went on all fours as I found what I was looking for. A large, sharp kitchen knife. Yes, that would do nicely. I started to shiver as I looked at the knife, and I sat down, starting to edge it towards my stomach ever so slightly. I was so happy. Soon I'd finally get my marshmallows, and this night would finally be over. I couldn't help grinning some more. Then, just as I was about to press that knife into my stomach, the kitchen door opened, and my roommate entered carrying grocery bags. For some strange reason, he dropped them in shock, looking at me as if I was crazy. I just stared back at him until I saw a small bag of marshmallows fall out of one of the grocery bags. I dropped the kitchen knife and got to my feet as my friend started yelling something. Whatever, I couldn't make out the words. It was all just one big blur to me. My friend ran out of the room and I could hear him in the other room calling someone. I didn't really care. My focus was on that little bag of marshmallows. These delightful little clouds. Smiling contentedly as I started to pick them up and head back to the counter, my friend kept shouting in the other room. Something must have spooked him, I guess. Oh well, I just opened the bag of marshmallows and put them into my hot cocoa and took a sip. Yes, I do like marshmallows. Now, even more oddly, if you replace all marshmallows with the word crack, you get the same story. But what I like most about it is even though it's simple and the words aren't the most artistic, it still carries along the three basic things that I think makes a story good. An interesting character, plot line, and theme. So if we go to the next one, the first one we'll talk about is character. The most important part of the story, characters are what populate the setting, get the plot moving, and draw the audience in. So if we think back to the marshmallow story, if Mr. Psycho Nut wasn't there at all, then there wouldn't have been anything going on. And the best ways to make a good character is relatability to the audience. If you have someone who's perfect in every way, Well, that's not exactly relatable. And raise your hand if you're perfect. There we go. We have Jesus in the corner over there. So most people really just aren't perfect, so it's hard to relate to somebody who has no issues going on in life. Likewise, when they do have things going on, things we can understand like bad grades, trouble with friends, poor family issues, that's something we can understand. Likewise, you don't want to have a character who's just completely a dirtbag. If everything about him is wrong, then that's just as annoying as a guy who's perfect. Unless he's Jesus, that's fine. And you also want to have variety among the characters. If everybody is acting the same and has the same opinions, it gets kind of boring, because we don't even need all those characters there. Let's say we have two sides, all right? Civil War base. We have the North and South. If we have the North, we take soldiers from the Union and present them as very good and nice, while the South is a bunch of vampires doing nothing but wanting to eat people. That's kind of, we can understand it. It's heroic, and the goal is trying to take them down, but it's less easier to understand and relate to, because no one's wholly evil. When you take a character and make them nothing but bad, your story lacks depth and it's not memorable. You'll see it once and you'll maybe think, okay, that movie was all right, I guess. A few minutes later, you'll forget you even used it, and you'll be wondering where your 20 bucks went. Okay, next slide. So here's usually where they screw up. A big thing showing up in movies nowadays is something called the Marty stew. He's not a human so much as he's a Ken doll, except instead of plastic, he's molded from untempered wish fulfillment. And this is kind of relating back to the whole perfect character. Usually it's not they're going to be without flaws, it's just all their flaws and all their virtues are things that the writer thinks is perfect. I've read a story actually about a woman who her only flaw was that she was so beautiful others hated her for it. So who among you really thinks that's a flaw, really? Now, you're not going to go all around thinking, I'm extremely beautiful and I'm so depressed for it. And you're not going to be extremely rich either and go, why do I have all this money? No, you're going to be happy about that. So it's not exactly a flaw. And another thing is uniformity. Like I said about diversity, you want to have characters who share the same viewpoint. If you throw out different, ideas, then you'll get more people thinking about what's going on. Is this guy wholly right or is this guy wholly wrong? And it adds depth to the story. But without that, you get them detached from the audience. Now, I threw up the Superman symbol here for a reason. I asked most of you what you thought about Superman, and in general, you were kind of, bland on. You didn't really care if he was a comic book character, but a few of you liked him. And he's an alright guy. When you think of him, you usually hear the words incorruptible, resolute, and all stuff like that. And that's okay, but for a character to be worth thinking about and caring about, not so much. I mean, the guy doesn't have any problems. Bullets can't touch him, and his whole social life is everybody loves Superman. I even remember a movie where his love interest died, and he could turn back time by spinning the world backwards. I don't get how that works, but he doesn't really have any issues if he can fix whatever he wants. So, I mean, they've tried making him better with recent movies like Man of Steel and Smallville, but for the most part, he's not exactly relatable because he doesn't have any issues. So, while characters make the story, it's what they do that makes the plot. And the principle number one, when you write a story, don't make it boring, okay? There's usually three basic steps. A character, usually the protagonist, wants something badly and is having trouble getting it. Now, the marshmallow story I told you, it started with a guy who loved marshmallows, okay? And he wanted something badly. This is usually where most stories mess up. They think the whole plot, what they want, has to be global in scale. The world's ending, aliens have come, they're harvesting our ankles for something. It doesn't have to be. As long as the character wants it, that's all we really care about. Because when we go into it, we're ejecting ourselves from reality and watching what's going on with these specific cast members. We don't care about what's going on in the real world so much because we're here for the entertainment value. So as long as the protagonist wants it, it's okay. And then they have to have trouble getting it. If the guy in Marshmallows had his bag of marshmallows already empty, he could have just put them into the hot cocoa and drank it. But since he didn't, he was willing to go to extreme lengths like cutting open his stomach. And that's messed up, which adds to the conflict. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. If you look at something and you intend to use it, you have to emulate it, which means you have to understand it. And to quote that guy called Monty Owen, who's able to come up with its own stuff. And what this means is when you talk about something, you have to really know what it is. All right? It can't just be a bunch of stuff that happens. This is usually messed up when people take ideas from the past and they dress it up in a different outfit and then they just resell it again. It's the same thing, but they don't understand it as much because they didn't really think about the idea. They just took something that already existed. A good example of this is a movie called Dances with Wolves. It was something a while back with Kevin Costner in which a soldier, was living out on the frontier, and he eventually came into contact with a tribe of Indians. And slowly over time, he integrated into with them and became almost an Indian himself, until eventually the soldiers he was originally a part of came and tried killing the Indians to take their land. Now, flash forward a few years and take that same plot idea, but make the Indians blue monkeys and set the thing in space, and you have the movie Avatar. So you want to change stuff up, because when you're just copy and pasting the idea, the whole movie feels hollow. And pointless conflict, that kind of all goes into the copy and pasting ideas. So, next slide, please. And theme, the heart of the story. This is usually what most stories will have, hopefully. You may not notice it, but think to your favorite movie. After it was all said and done, was there some general lesson that you got from it? Something at the end of the story where, like the power of friendship, for example. We have a guy who's been a loner for most of his life, but he's having trouble accomplishing his goals. And now he's decided to help other people become friends and get friends himself, and he's able to get more of what he wants. That's a lesson that they teach at the end of the story. Now, for the most part, stories will have that without people even realizing it. It's just something that shows up, whether they hope for it or not. But specifically, stories were first told for entertainment and education. This is what separates reality from fiction. Real life has no central theme, no message, or great meaning, save for the ones we transpose on ourselves. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with religion per se. This is just saying, from the beginning of the earth to when it eventually blows up, there's no overall lesson. With stories, however, they're usually something that we can take for ourselves and use that to progress forward as human beings. So, sometimes, though, themes don't exactly work out the way the author planned. Something called epileptic trees. This is a term for wild, off-the-wall theories named after a leading tinfoil hat theory explaining mysterious, shaking, rustly trees on Lost during the first season. And the theory is that the trees were having epileptic fits. The problem with that is, while most stories will have a theme, some people try seeing them when they're not there or looking at the wrong aspects. When the movie Frozen first came out, I would usually go to check my emails on Yahoo, and on the message board, they would always be putting these articles that were hinting at a possibility that Frozen's theme was slightly hinting at something that could have been considered incestuous. So that was a bit far-fetched. And Disney movies. Growing up, I always thought they were pretty cool, and they still are, but if you take a look back at them now, you'll notice some of the themes they're presenting aren't exactly the best. I'm not going to shatter anybody's childhood memories here, but I'm just saying, Beauty and the Beast and Stockholm Syndrome might be considered looking at. So, in conclusion, unrelatable characters, pointless plots, and epileptic-inducing themes make bad stories. And sometimes you'll be able to see these in trailers. Bad writers have a habit of putting that into their trailers in the back of book covers. So if you look for it, you might just notice it. And if you do, you might be able to save a few bucks by not buying it. So that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, you guys both are going today, so y'all need to hurry. And if y'all need passes, I'll write you passes to your next class. So let's get it going.